As some of you might know, The Last of Us 2 has had some major leaks, and it's sparking quite the controversy online. People were pretty upset about the things that have been leaked, and I'm just here to talk today about the response to it a little bit, and I kind of wanted to cover specifically someone in particular, Chris Raygun on Twitter and his responses, and I wanted to cover that a little bit. But first, let me just preface this all by saying, um, I have no investment in The Last of Us at all. I'm very familiar with The Last of Us. I've seen the first game in its entirety, all the like a full playthrough of that game on the internet, and so I'm familiar with the Last of Us universe. I'm familiar with the characters. I know how the first game ends. I know the main story beats. I've seen a full playthrough of the game. I know what's going on. So I don't have to have played it to understand what's going on or to understand why certain people were upset with the decisions that are made so far. So, as some of you may or may not know, there, I mean, we have very serious story beats that have been leaked. Like, I'm talking like character deaths. I'm talking new characters doing things, old characters doing things they would never do. Um, you know, in-game full in-game cutscenes have been out there, and it's a mess. It really is a mess, and it's I guess it's the consensus, at least from what I can see, the reason why this stuff is being leaked is because the devs aren't having a good time making this game, I guess, and they're under guidelines they don't necessarily want to follow, and a lot of the conversation is, oh, is are these devs doing this in spite of what Naughty Dog wants, because Naughty Dog wants to push this political agenda that the devs don't necessarily agree with. And it's not all the devs, it's not one dev, it's not 10 I don't know how it works. I don't know who's all involved. These are things that I've read, and this just seems to be like agreed upon as like this is kind of like why it's happening, I guess. So there's that, and then nobody's like confirmed like, oh, this person is the person who's leaking it, but it's got to be one of the devs, because we have full in-game cutscenes, we have full dialogue, we have character deaths, certain stuff like that is out there, that the only person who would know would be a person who has worked on the game at this point. So yeah, fans are not too happy about what they're seeing in these leaks. I'm not going to be covering the leaks specifically in this video. I just wanted to give my take on Chris Raygun's take, and I thought he had a pretty bad take, if I'm being honest. So, right here, Chris Raygun, he's a notable YouTuber. I follow him. I love Chris Raygun. He makes some really good videos. I don't always agree with a lot of the stuff he says. In fact, I find myself disagreeing with him more these days than I ever have. But this tweet right here, I've never really been a huge fan of The Last of Us, but taking the bullet points of the leaked plot removed from the greater context of the implementation and making a value judgment based on that is pretty fucking smooth brain. I can make any game sound like sound shit like this. So basically he's trying to say like, oh, guys, we shouldn't be taking this game, like the cutscenes and what we've heard and what the leaks say, out of context and making a judgment call based on the game. And I somewhat agree with that to an extent, but when it's to this level that The Last of Us 2 is done, and can I just say, I think that this might be like some of the worst I've ever seen. Besides from like a TV production, this is pretty crazy how much has been leaked about The Last of Us 2. I mean, they're not really leaving too much for the imagination, whoever's leaking this stuff. So it's pretty wild. But I agree that we can't judge something based off of the little information we have, and then being like, lol, fuck that game. That game's shit. Like, I understand why you shouldn't do that. And me personally, I don't do that myself. I like to experience things for myself before I make a judgment call. But with certain games, I feel like you can make that judgment call. I've always compared The Last of Us 2 to like a Telltale game, okay? In that of there's light gameplay elements. I mean, that there's light gameplay elements, heavy story. This was a major criticism for the first game. I've heard that up and down, left and right, that's the main criticism of Last of Us is just the gameplay loop is just, I mean, it's like atrocious. It's boring. It's just downright boring. It loses its glamour after the first half an hour, and that's just when it comes to video games. I mean, that's pretty much A1. You can have a game with a shit story, but great gameplay, and you'll at least play it again, like something like Borderlands 3, for example, has like a shit story, but it's really fucking fun to play. And games like Destiny as well, they're like fun to play, have like a shit story, whatever. Okay, I digress. So I get what he's trying to say here. I understand it, but I disagree because he's trying to basically diminish these arguments to you guys are being fucking smooth brains making a judgment call like this. It's like, dude, we have major character deaths here. We have major story beats that have been exposed here. And if the gameplay is at all like the first game, we're looking at a pretty fucking shit game, because then you have shit gameplay and a shit story with a politically charged story that nobody is going to want, because that has never panned out well in recent history when it comes to pushing political agendas in games. Like the most recent Wolfenstein game, for example, was a very good example of this. It just it fucking flopped, and a lot of it had that stupid SJW stuff pushed into it. So whatever, I'm not gonna get into that stuff. I'm just gonna try to stay on topic here. I don't have this scripted at all. I'm just kind of ranting freeform here, as if you couldn't tell. So anyway, somebody replied to this tweet and said, "To be fair, the actual cutscenes are out there." Okay, which I agree with, because I mean he's basically trying to say, guys, you can't take this out of context, and it's just leaked plot from its greater context. There's full length cutscenes out there, and it's true. And he said, this is what Chris said. He said, removed from player experience, I hated the cutscene trailer in Death Stranding and ended up loving the game. You gotta judge a game as complete work, not a synopsis or a handful of cutscenes removed from the greater context of the player actually playing the game. So I agree with that, again, to an extent. But when you're talking about something like with what's happening with The Last of Us Part 2, it's a little bit more extreme, because we have like full-on character interactions and conversations, and you guys can look this up for yourselves. Okay, I'm not gonna sit here and name them off. Like if you want to know, you want to know. I'm not gonna spoil it for people, because I just have no stake in the game, so there's no purpose for me to spoil it myself. But anyway, he gets into this long argument with this person, and they go back and forth, and he pretty much just tries to I don't know, he kind of tries to, like, he says at one point, he's like, are you remedial? Like, he's clearly going after this guy. But this guy basically says, like, yeah, we also have gameplay and it looks like ass as well. I get it, you're a fan of The Last of Us, you're in denial, but your wallet will thank you for not spending money on that. And then Chris says, The Last of Us is an important game, but it was one of the least fun experiences I've ever had, and I have no intention of ever playing it again. The performances and story were great, which I agree with, but the DLC was terrible, which I also agree with, and the gameplay loop was bog standard. So yeah, huge The Last of Us fan. So he's basically just trying to defend himself by saying, like, no, I'm no shill for The Last of Us, but, like, this is my stance on a game and its work, and when it should be judged and when it shouldn't be judged. And it's not like it's a crazy take, okay, for him to say these things, but at the same time, within the context of The Last of Us 2, I think it's misguided, honestly, because we have so much information now that to say that, oh, you can't judge that it doesn't make sense to me. Like, for example, Star Wars Battlefront 2, a couple years ago, that comes out, right? EA Star Wars Battlefront 2. My friend wants me to buy it. I don't want to buy it. Why don't I want to buy it? I never played it myself. Well, I don't want to buy it for many reasons. One, the story is complete shit and is not fun. It is unpolished. It is buggy as hell, and the characters are just lackluster. So we have that. Two, from the multiplayer aspect, the game was absolutely pay to win. So why would I want to buy a game for $60, right? And then have to play an online experience where people who take their mother's credit card and give out $60 more to their account, they then get a Darth Vader that can one hit me, as opposed to my Darth Vader who is squishy as hell, who barely has any health compared to the guy who paid an extra $60 to get these enhancements in game. It's something like that. There's judgments there that you can make before you spend the money on a game, especially a game that has bad business practices like Battlefront 2 had. So I think that from that aspect, I think there's a fair argument to be made as to why you wouldn't buy something before playing it. I think there's many games out there that you can make that judgment call for, especially with the way that YouTube criticism is nowadays, or reviewers and stuff like that. Like, you can really get to understand what you're getting before you buy it. And there's reviewers out there who do complete reviews, like very in-depth reviews, and don't spoil anything. And I've watched a couple of those videos, and I've bought those games without having anything spoiled for me, and I was glad to buy them because I was like, wow, this really seems like a good game, like from what I've seen. So anyway, he had a pretty bad take here, in my opinion, and it got where what sparked me to want to make the video I'm making now is this tweet where Chris goes, "Lol, cowboy gets sick and dies for 40 hours. Lol, 1 out of 10." I mean, this is so stupid. Like, he's trying to equate what's happening with The Last of Us 2 to the entirety of Red Dead Redemption 2 by saying, like, ha, I can make any game sound bad out of context. Well, Chris, there is context though, man. There is context for the Last of Us 2. We have full cutscenes. We have full dialogue. We have character deaths. I think the ending is even out there. Okay, like, we have a lot more information now than just saying, lol, Last of Us 2 is bad because a woman kills somebody, lol, 1 out of 10. Like, no, that's not why people were saying that it's bad. That doesn't, and that's also not the same thing at all. Okay, like, we have information here, and like I said, there's no game I've ever seen get leaked this bad. The only other thing I've ever seen get leaked like this was it's like television series or movies. Like, for instance, like Game of Thrones Season 8, like, the leaks were all over the place for Season 8. And, again, I feel like leaks start to happen when your employees are not happy with what's going on in-house. And, a lot of the Game of Thrones actors were not too thrilled with what was going on. I don't know who leaked the stuff for Game of Thrones. I'm just saying, there's a lot of people who weren't happy with the production of, I shouldn't say the production, but the way that the story went in Game of Thrones. So I feel like when you have that, you easily get leaks out there. Other than that, the leaks are usually like very minor because you could tell it's like word of mouth from like a dev to like other people. Whereas like here, we straight up have full in-game cutscenes. So like, it's really hard to just be like, yeah, this is lol, cowboy gets sick and dies for 40 hours. This game's shit. Like, that's not how it works. This one guy even said, dude, now you're just trying to be a contrarian and be funny. The Last of Us 2 flaws are far worse than just a single sentence, which, yeah, I agree with that. I mean, that's literally what's happening here. I mean, he's trying to make it seem like it's this like little thing, and I mean, there's just so I mean, okay, maybe since he's interested in this game, and like, I don't know Chris personally, but I'm sure he's at least interested in this game enough to be like, I'm not going to spoil stuff for myself, but like, he's seen like people that he follows like maybe tweeting about it, saying like, oh, this stuff's real bad. Maybe he doesn't know like how bad the actual leaks are, but I feel like any reasonable person who saw the leaks for this game, if they saw them, they would just be like, wow, this is shit, man. Like, this is a bad call. This game is just not going to do well. But I don't know, guys. Yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. Am I wrong on this? I mean, personally, I don't think I am. I think I made a pretty good case as to why you can judge a game before you buy it, and especially in the situation with The Last of Us 2. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think down below. And yeah, that's pretty much all we got today. So thanks for watching.